Hello, guys. Welcome to Keeping Score. We have an action packed week of football to talk about. We're going to look at the Copa del Ray and the Champions League fixtures. Barcelona were involved in two out of these three fixtures, and they somehow managed to exceed expectations every single time. Now, if we're talking about the Copa del Rey final, it was already marred with controversy to begin with because of Real Madrid TV's statement on the ref that he was biased in favor of Barcelona. And then the ref coming out visibly emotional about the fact that his family and his career is being put in jeopardy by the statements that they're given. Real Madrid, however, instead of apologizing or not saying anything at all, doubled down and cancelled the pre match conference and I think their final training as well as a sign of protest of some sort. It's just they're trying to get any advantage they can in this situation. And honestly, I feel like it had an impact on how the referee's decision making was being made in during the match. However, Barcelona were laser focused because the manner in which they scored the first goal, where Bellingham's pass interceptory, Pedri started the move and then ended up finishing it by putting the ball in the top corner. Meanwhile, Jude was just standing like this, still trying to figure out how that pass got intercepted, which is where you lose your man. But Real Madrid started the second hand really well. Mbappe came off the bench and managed to finally end his free kick drought by putting it in, which is still a bit of a weird free kick. I don't know how that managed to get through. And putting an end to has Kylian Mbappe scored a free kick Twitter account, which was there for God knows how long. But then after that, Barcelona's weakness on set pieces, which we've talked about in the last video, where corners where we saw them being exposed against Dortmund and now in Real Madrid and even against Inter, we've seen how fallible they are when it comes to corners specifically and free kicks even, which raises the question that is there something that they can do to counter it? But at this point in time, it seems like a major weakness for them. But Tchouaméni took advantage of it, scored a goal, and Real Madrid looked on the front foot. But Ferran Torres' goal was just unbelievable, and then they managed to end the half at 2-2, followed by extra time. Now there was a controversial penalty decision, which we are declared to be not a penalty, but I don't think I agree with that decision, where it just seemed like, of course, every striker tries to make the most of a position that they're in, but I don't think he just crumpled like that. I do think there was some sort of contact. And even if that's not a penalty, then for me, what Rudiger did to Ferran Torres, where he shanked his leg, was a definite penalty. I just feel like Real Madrid really got better under the stick in this regard. And yet, that Jules Koundé burst through the middle, interception, and then a low driven 25-yard strike to end the game is not something I had on my bingo card, is not something that I foresaw, or I'm sure anybody foresaw, but him putting the final nail in the coffin was just something else. It was just. I, how there's a joke going around that he did this because he didn't want the match to go to penalties because he's had an unfortunate record of penalties, and good for him, they managed to seal the win and they're still on the treble right now. Now the post-match chaos is just something else in this. Real Madrid obviously unhappy with the way things were going. So Rudiger got up and just threw a chunk of ice at the referee, which is just what is going on? Like, how is this okay? How disrespectful can you possibly be? Like losing your head over this, and like most of the Madrid team was on the pitch at that point in time, the sidelines, and then Lucas Vasquez also received a red card for entering the pitch aggressively, and Bellingham received it, but it was rescinded. But for me, the problem is that Antonio Rudiger only getting a six-match ban is just unfair in this regard. How is this? If so, the chunk of ice missed the ref by some margin, but if it hits him, if it's proper battery at this point in time. Yeah, अगर आप battery कर रहे हो एक match के अंदर, what are you? How are you expecting to get away with this? Like, would the punishment would have been worse if he was attacking, but intent को आप consider नहीं कर रहे हो? It doesn't make sense. I think it was a poor decision from La Liga or the Champions League to just like give him six matches off on that, because that doesn't really make sense. This probably should have been penalized a bit more, quite a bit more, because you have to set a good precedent in this situation where other players would actually think twice before making this sort of action or thinking about making some sort of rash decision. But instead of just getting six matches, not 6 matches as a penalty. So I think that was quite unsatisfactory as a decision, but I don't think anybody's also really surprised by that. So there is that. But it was a great match if you take out all the what happened in the end. Yeah, sure, the penalty decision was contestable, and maybe there's some things there, but I think overall as a match, I had a great time. It was end-to-end football. Barcelona once again making a comeback in this sort of a situation where the pressure was on is something special from that side. And then if we talk about the match last night with Inter keeping up with Barcelona's team, down 2-0 so early on in the game. Thuram scoring a goal in the first 30 seconds and Dumfries following up pretty soon. And by the way, I have to say this. In the match against Inter, was there a bad goal? I think maybe like the only above average or good goal was just like the Dumfries third goal, but otherwise, um, I don't think they were all absolute bangers in every sense of the word. That Thuram flick was unbelievable. That Rafinha shot was unbelievable. The build up to Rafinha's pass to Ferran Torres was insane because that Pedri pass is just what is that pass? And Yamal's goal is just oh my god, what is that kid? Is he a kid? Like I need to know. Is Yamal actually a child? Is this some Shai the Freely shit where he says he's 17 but he's actually 22 or something, because otherwise I can't for the life of me make sense how a 17-year-old is doing this to grown men and good players, like not just average grown men. This is not me or you, this is just like world class players or world talent players where like on this stage how does that make sense? And we'll come back to Lamine in a bit, but 2-0 down, 2-2. And honestly, uh, at that point in time, I thought the game was over. Barcelona are just now going to run a train through Inter's dreams and hopes. But to be able to come back at Camp Nou, score the third, and then get killed off or to achieve a draw by just like a Rafinha wonder strike is okay, because the way they managed to like they sort of lost their heads in the second half, in the first half, where Barcelona just started making a comeback and it was just like what is happening कि यार हम इनको किस तरह retain करें. लेकिन उसके बाद the second half, and honestly the way Inzaghi runs this side is just so fascinating because uske baad they kept pushing Barcelona. Mkhitaryan was off by a toe in that match. A toe. I don't even believe that decision. Honestly, yaar, ye kaise ho sakta hai? How is he off? Like, is the technology really that good enough where you can tell that he's off by this much, like just his toe? And that could have been just like their icing on the cake. They could have won that match. But to come to the Camp Nou and the form that Barcelona is and walk away with a 3-3 draw is unbelievable. San Siro is going to be lit next week. It's going to be everything's there to play for yet, and I hope this Inter shows up because honestly, it's just fascinating how they managed to keep a hold on to this game and force Barcelona to take play the manner that they did. And shackling this Barcelona attack is not easy. I know people will say कि यार 3 गोल तो फिर भी कर लिए थे, but this Barcelona side has infinite potential to do. And if you look at all the Barcelona goals, two of them are just absolute wonder goals where Lamine Yamal just like jig 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 goes through three players, and you're just like, भाई ये कहाँ से निकला है? इसने किया क्या? And that finish is you. And you know the craziest thing is कि Inzaghi post match is like, in my 9 years of management, I've never seen a player like this. A player like him is born 50 years after, like once every 50 years. And it's all true. Like even the players were coming out like, यार हम इससे ज़्यादा क्या कर सकते थे? We did what we could. He got one goal, but uh, and Lamine's constant ability to just like cut and like use his right foot as effectively. Maybe it's not as great as his left foot, but for crossing, every cross he put in was dangerous. And if we're back on Lamine Yamal, why not? Isn't it time for him to be being like for him to be considered as a maybe a potential Ballon d'Or contender. I think he has about 39 goal contributions, which is like 15 goals and 24 assists. Yeah, I know people will say कि यार 15 goals से क्या होना है इस तरह से. Rafinha obviously has better stats overall in all competitions, but I Salah also has done excellent this season, so it's up between Rafinha and Salah for me at this point in time. But I don't think कि like Lamine Yamal में इतना फर्क है उनसे, and I can guarantee that if Lamine wasn't playing in this side, so they wouldn't have looked like this. I don't know if Rafinha के होने ना होने से exactly impact होता है, but I know for a fact that if Lamine wasn't playing in this side, they don't look like this season. So this is just like everything I've seen from him. Yeah, uski kabhi kabar he hasn't scored, but the fact is that he's 17 years old. He's broken almost 17 records already, where he's the youngest player. Youngest player to score in the Champions League final. Most goals scored by a player under the age of 18 in the Champions League. He's the youngest player to start everything: the Euro semi-final, Euro final, Euro whatever. Youngest player to score in all of these things. Like the list of accolades is just insane, and like he's burned every record there was for a young player doing that, and he has 100 caps for Barcelona at 17. 100 caps at like 100 appearances for Barcelona at 17 is insane. He's been playing with them since he was 15 years old. How does any of this make sense? There has to be something. I mean, like the talent, and you know, I was looking at Jordi Alba's interview, and he was just like, Messi considers him to be his successor, and is saying that मैं तो उससे भी चीजें सीख रहा हूँ इस वक्त at this stage of my career, which is obviously him being polite and everything, but it's unbelievable what a kid like that is doing and what he's managed to achieve. मेरा नहीं ख्याल था that I would ever live to see somebody like this after the Messi Ronaldo war. Of course, there were going to be good players like Mbappe, Haaland types, but for somebody to come in and manage what they've managed is just what he's managed is just unbelievable. And so credit to Barcelona, and I think unbelievable playing from Inter as well, where they managed to stay within the game, walked out of Nou Camp with a draw and a 3-3 draw. This is an Inter side, by the way, which hasn't won a game in the last three fixtures, and they haven't scored a goal in the last three fixtures. So, matlab, for them to manage to do all of this against this sort of an offensive unit is unbelievable. And they've done well. I think on most websites, sporting websites, the prediction was that the Barcelona has a 70% chance of winning. And I think 7% draw tha, and then like 22, 23% for Inter winning. And Inter have managed to like put all of those doubters on the side, and I'm really happy to see because I genuinely believe in this Inter side. When I say they might not have the best players in all positions, but as a side, as a unit, there are very few teams that can match up with them in that regard. And Inzaghi has done a brilliant job in building the side, in the resources that they have, and the way he's managed to pull it off. They might not have a Lamine Yamal or Pedri. Actually, they have a Barella, and Nico Barella for me is one of the best centre midfielders on this planet. There's very few players like him. And even last night, there's so many moments where he just broke Barcelona's press to release the ball, release the pressure. Is always a fascinating watch. So in that regard, that match was eventful. It was a lot happening. But again, credit to Barcelona for like despite all their weaknesses on set pieces and conceding goals, they still managed to come back from 2-0 down and end the match at 3-3 at 3-3. So that was something. And then the one of the more interesting, if not the highest scoring matches of this Champions League was Arsenal versus PSG. Now, at the Emirates Stadium, I definitely had higher expectations from Arsenal because I felt that in at home they would be able to take some form of advantage, maybe like a goal, maybe a draw, something like that. But they wouldn't just like lose 1-0. At least this was this was what I was expecting. The problem is in the last video we talked about how I view certain sides as complete sides, and this probably is the best Champions League for me ever, or at least in the recent past. And this Arsenal side, I said even then, has just one thing lacking, which is a proper finisher. And it doesn't matter what they do, if nobody's scoring a goal, then all of that is for naught. And they walked out of that match with a higher XG, I think. Yeah. And it didn't matter because that Dembele goal, and uh, honestly, it's so hard to just like, I mean, 1.63 XG to 1.16. And that Dembele goal was unbelievable. PSG also managed to carve their own chances and did not finish them. They could have maybe doubled that lead early on, but it's fine because they're going back to their home ground, and they'll probably have like a better chance of winning over there. But generally, overall, how Arsenal did not manage to make their way back into this game with that. I'll highlight two chances, that Trossard chance and that Martinelli chance. And the thing is, I'm not screaming at Martinelli for not scoring that or not being unable to, because I understand there's a certain limit in which his capacity. Yeah, he was doing really well in the previous seasons, but I think this is what his form has now just like come to. Like, this is the level of player that maybe he is for me. Uh, the thing that I was really surprised by was how poor and how invisible Odegaard was in this match. So, for those of you who don't know, Odegaard had 26 attempted passes and he made 24. I think a significant chunk of the Arsenal team had more passes than him in that situation. Merino had more, Rice had more, Kivor had more, Saliba had more. And this is a guy who you're counting on to be your talisman, who's supposed to carry you. He was the player of the season last year in the Premier League. And again, I've never viewed Odegaard as one of the best players in the world. But I understand that the one thing he does really well is make that Arsenal side really fluid in the way how he keeps things ticking. And he hasn't really shattered everybody's expectations by scoring loads of goals or assists. But the space he manages to carve out, or the ball movement that he provides, is just makes it easier for Arsenal to move up front. And if Odegaard isn't doing this, at least, then he offers nothing. And him not being in that position is quite tragic. And him not being able to deliver in this match is one of the reasons Arsenal were unable to just come back in this game. Marino's weird header was ruled offside. But overall, I was just really disappointed with how some players in Arsenal didn't manage to show up. Saliba made an unbelievable tackle uh, near the end where they probably could have gotten through. But generally, like Saka was, I think, if I was looking at the match ratings on a couple of apps, and Saka had a poor rating, but I thought Saka was the only one who was posing any sort of threat with his crosses and constantly cutting inside, pushing the defender on the weaker foot. The way he managed to constantly just push them back, I think people don't maybe rate that, but every ball was dangerous. And if maybe, Donnarumma wasn't having one of the best days of his career as a keeper, Arsenal probably would have made a comeback. But poor finishing, the lack of a proper striker, not investing in a proper forward is what has probably cost Arsenal this match again. And there's a million ways to spin this. What if Donnarumma wasn't having the best game of his life or whatever? But if you have a proper nine, you probably end up scoring a couple of goals at least in this sort of a match. So Arsenal's Arsenal's main challenge remains that can they score goals against this good formidable PSG side, which is a very solid looking side, and they which aside, so Arsenal managed to come back in this game from I think the 30th minute to the 60th minute, but after that PSG just locked the game up. And if they weren't scoring, they weren't going to let you score as well. And Arsenal sort of just like complied with them and left the game at that. So the game at PSG should be interesting, but I just hope that they have it in them to score a couple of goals, because on recent showing, that's what they've struggled with the most. And Martinelli, Trossard, and Odegaard has to do so much better than he has done in this match. And I hope he does so, because if he's not working, they don't have an adequate replacement to make sure for an adequate replacement for someone who keeps the side ticking. So this is what I make of it. I'm excited for the next legs, and I think this is going to be fantastic. We're also going to be discussing United's clash with Bilbao sometime on the weekend. So come back, tune in. Make sure you like and subscribe. Please check out our YouTube channel. Please follow us on Insta, wherever you see this. Give us a follow on YouTube. Give us a follow on Insta. We'll be back soon. Thank you for tuning in. Bye bye.